with Magnus coming in fresh after that 24 hours of a break.
Getting to the stage for Magnus Carlsen, he cruised through with wins against Nordebek Abdulsatrov and Jan-Krzysztof Duda. A different storyline for the kid, for the prodigy on the stage. Nihal Sarin taking down yesterday some big giants himself. Momentum is on his side. Wins against Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. Wins against Anish Giri without a single loss. You know, on paper, Magnus Carlsen wins this matchup 9 out of 10 times. Even Nihal Sarin here, looking for that 1 out of 10, and he wants to do it today.
Well, like Ben said on the desk, right? 4 draws in 500 against Magnus. You know what? Those 4 draws could come now, right? And that could instantly send Ben into the Armageddon for all we know. The point is, if the opportunity is there, you take it. And Nihal Sarin, Magnus himself said his performance is absolutely incredible. He's gone out of his way to praise his opponent, and it's very weird being on a stage as well where we're talking about a chess prodigy and it's not Magnus, but he sat there himself. This is very exciting. It has the potential to really serve us up a classic.
Exactly, and although he does start as the underdog Nihal Sarin, he has the weapons to hurt Magnus. He has the mouse skills. He did it against MVL, some trickery in a difficult position, helping him on the clock. He did it against Anish Giri, forcing Anish to blunder a queen in a winning position, again, due to clock pressure. And if he can cling on, surviving these games against Magnus, take it down to the wire, down deep into the endgame, maybe he'll stand a chance. In the meantime, it's the Catalan opening to start this one.
Nihal's best chance in this match would be really trying to get into those time scrambles where both players have got about a minute on the clock and the position is dynamic. It's crazy. It's still got pieces on the board and he's not completely lost in that because Magnus converts that then. For Nihal, it's going to be about building that time pressure, trying to get to that Armageddon. The odds for him would increase. I'll say one thing. Nihal is the one player who's played more bullet,
right,
barring Hikaru Nakamura and Alireza Firouzja on the planet.
Which is...
And that sort of has built this cheat code in him, which gets activated under 1 minute. And I think that's what he'll be looking for today in this matchup.
I mean, that's amazing, right? The fact that he's, in terms of number of games played, he's 3rd place behind 2 of the favorites to win this whole thing. It really shows that he belongs in that top drawer alongside all of the rest of these names. So he's fantastic when the time gets scarce, but he has to build up that advantage to begin with, and he's already 1 minute behind Magnus at this stage of the game. And I have to say, I'm a little bit surprised because considering that game plan, like you rightly mentioned, Tanya, I feel like Nihal should be blitzing these out to try and get a 1-2 minute advantage very, very early on, but he's on the receiving end of that right now.
Yeah, the one thing about Magnus, though, is that he at least starts games quite quickly. The only time he really slows down is if it's super complicated. There's a lot to calculate. But this isn't one of those types of positions. It's hard, of course, when you start with black. For Nihal, a draw would be a great way to begin this quarterfinal. But the pawn that he went up, Nihal Sarin, is about to fall. Magnus pawn hunting with his queen. It's a queen's gambit accepted in a way, but Magnus is going to remove the word gambit from the equation.
On the very next move. And, you know, speaking of trying to build on the clock, it's not easy when you're up against Magnus Carlsen. You also have to balance that on the edge of your sword by not just getting into a position that you're completely lost in the first 15 moves.
Sure. Yeah.
So you have to play the good moves. You have to keep control over the clock. And that doesn't seem to be going so well for Nihal so far, reaching the 7.5 minute mark. And I still think it's early days. The Catalan, one of the most studded openings, slightly surprised how much time Nihal's taking here.
I'm worried that we have some parallels here from the conversations that we were talking about earlier with Nordebek versus Firouzja, for example, where you can be an absolute beast with under a minute on your clock, but to what extent does that matter when your opponent still has 5, for example? And I'm a little scared because that advantage is about to go above 2 minutes, and we're only on move 12 of a very well-studied opening. So I'm curious to get inside the head of Nihal Sarin here and find out, well, what is it he's thinking about right now? What is he planning? What does he unleash off the back of this?
Yeah, he unleashes this move, a pawn sacrifice of his own, and Magnus reacts there on the camera. This one is a pawn sacrifice in 2 different ways. Can be captured by the queen, it can be captured by the pawn. Either way, there are downsides for white. He does take with the pawn. Maybe if we just go back a move to show what could have happened if he had taken with the queen here, Magnus Carlsen. The black knight would have jumped into b3 with a nasty fork. This one devastating the black Knight snacking on the white rook in the corner next move. Instead, taking with the pawn comes with downsides as well, as we see Nihal has jumped into the center with his knight, and the white pawns are wrecked on the queen side, all isolated, all weak, long term, short term. This is a great way to fight against Magnus in the opening. Go direct as Magnus swings his queen across. Already a question mark from the world number 1.
Magnus going direct as well. Yes, I see the question mark, but again, a very human approach, right? He sets ideas of his own. That bishop from c1 is now about to snack on that pawn on h6 as the g7 pawn was pinned, forcing Nihal Sarin to fight against that threat. He does attack the queen, which feels a little vulnerable. Magnus, did he rush through with that square?
Yeah, Magnus rushing. Nihal closed his eyes there, leant back. I don't know if he was taking a short nap, whether he was meditating. That is a feature of some of the modern generation. This meditative state they go into, just stay in this kind of trance, just remove the nerves to stay focused, stay present. I will mention there is a bit of a dynamic here. Nihal, compared to some of his compatriots, like Gukesh, like Pragnananda, like Erigaisi, hasn't faced Magnus that many times. I was looking through games between these two. They are few and far between, mostly in speed chess. So some experience there, but often you need to have experienced those devastating losses. You need to kind of believe with a first win against Magnus that you can do it again. But Nihal, he's doing this for the first time.
First little bit of a think there from Magnus, eating into that time advantage, which was up to about 2 minutes, now shrunk to closer to 1 minute. Queen h5 played, but continuing to hunt with the bishop moving back to the back rank.
He does, and he makes that move pretty quickly. And to your point about, his teammates, his compatriot, I will point out that Nihal Sarin was the first Indian prodigy to break out into the scene. But his training, his method of improving at chess has been drastically different compared to Arjun, Gukesh and Pragnananda, where he focused so much on these fast play formats, on playing online a lot, and sort of mastered that, especially during the pandemic, which is why we see him with these incredible performances when it comes to speed play. Somehow in the classical, it always felt like he felt a little short. He felt just a little bit away from the rest of them who focused on the classical formats, and that's something I think Nihal is actively working on now, but so far his biggest strength has been speed chess.
And it's paying off so far in this game. The Black Knight has been happily gobbling up, like Pac-Man, all of Magnus's pawns. Suddenly it's Nihal. He started the game a pawn up. He gave a pawn back. He gave another pawn. He was a pawn down. Now he's a pawn up again. And for now, Magnus has some compensation due to active pieces. But Nihal, great start to this game. I've been teammates with him before in some leagues in the Spanish league. Literally at dinner, he's playing bullet chess on his phone. He's team meetings, playing bullet chess on his phone. 2 minutes before a classical game, playing bullet chess on his phone.
That's why he's so quick. If you can do that on a touch screen, like a mouse, you can be really precise. Doing that on touch screen is insane.
His speed is absolutely nuts. There's a reason he's called the Flash.
The Flash. I'm learning that for the first time. And will it be a flash in the pan? Will it be a win for Nihal Sarin this match? First, he moves his queen off some vulnerable squares. The white knight leaps forward. Magnus is trying his best to create threats, create some action going, but that can be guarded by the black bishop, the weak e6 pawn. Still looking very healthy for Nihal. It feels like he's playing from a position of strength. If he wants to, he can just lock this game down, maybe return a pawn to force a draw. But
it almost
maybe more
feels like his game plan here is, right, let's see if we can swap off all the pieces and play against the pawns on a3 and c5 and just play against those weaknesses long term. If I get a win, great. If it ends up being a draw, it's going to be uncomfortable for Magnus. It certainly feels like Nihal here in game number 1, at least for now, has the upper hand. But he has the upper hand on the board, and he's back to 2 minutes down on the clock.
But he's doing really well on the board. He's up that pawn. Right now, attacked, comes in with a big threat, this last knight move. Knight takes pawn would be a fork on the queen and the rook. Expecting Nihal to find a way to defend it, to use one of the pieces. He could think about improving the position of his bishop, to use that as a defensive piece, or maybe even a potential rook lift to keep that pawn defended. But to your point, John, whichever he decides, he needs to do it fast.
Yep.
He goes with the bishop, connecting the two rooks.
Great move, great start. Magnus quick with a response. And no, Magnus isn't necessarily known as the speediest these days, but he used to be great at bullet himself. And I think, at least in the middle of a game, he's one of the fastest. He trusts his instincts. He knows what type of endgame he might be wanting to head for. He's very practical, Magnus Carlsen. So getting him down to the 30-second versus 30-second mark That is already a huge achievement and not easy to accomplish. Nihal, definitely with 4 minutes left, needs to keep this pace going.
He does keep the pace on the board, right? That last move is also hinting at that e-pawn moving forward.
For sure.
It's a 4 versus 3 on the right flank for Nihal. And that advantage is only as strong as the mobility of the pawns at the center of the board. So it's something that Magnus has to worry about. Once that pawn gets to e4, it's going to shut off the light squared bishop as well. Magnus Carlsen improves the position of the king. Are we going to see the pawn advance?
Ooh, very subtle play. I'm going to say very professional from both sides. The king positions not entirely comfortable, so they get ready. Just kind of keeping each other guessing. I think your move's going to land very, very shortly, Tanya. The black e-pawn is about to push, but Magnus might want to either brace for impact and get ready to reply, or start the action himself before Nihal is ready.
Magnus Carlsen, he's on a think. The clock's getting closer now. Magnus down a pawn, but a lot of piece dynamics, especially on the left flank, trying to think about how he can make the most of it.
Plenty of tempting moves. One move would be knight to b5, the white knight jumping forward to attack the black queen. You could think about pushing your c-pawn forward, some calculation involved there, maybe another temporary pawn sacrifice just to open lines for the white rooks. For now, the white queen struggling to be improved, the white bishop also struggling to move. Feels like a knight or pawn move incoming from Magnus Carlsen, but a bit of indecision, time advantage drifting away.
I'm glancing at why Magnus is spending that much time in this position, and this is definitely not my own, but it turns out bishop takes pawn is on in this position, because combining that with your idea of pushing the pawn forward, David, you can take the pawn first and then fork. Magnus has decided against it, but he was probably doing some calculation on whether that line was any good for him.
That would have been very, very flashy. We could have seen a bishop takes pawn move followed by white pushing forward with c6. And instead, there was a little trade in the position. And let's show that possibility that Magnus probably spent 2 minutes calculating there. He could have played bishop takes b7, and if the black knight recaptures c6 here, would have regained the material, potentially with interest. I think the black bishop would be forced back, and after some trades here, we could see the white rook coming in, maybe a queen trade as well, and an endgame that Magnus possibly didn't like. The black bishop would have been very strong in the center of the board, even though he might have ended up with level material. Magnus instead, if we go back to the game now, keeping queens on, keeping a bit more tension, and at least now it does feel like a 3-result game. The other one might have been closer to a draw, but not what Magnus wants.
And what's great as well is that you know, inside the head of Magnus Carlsen, he would have just looked at everything we just saw on the analysis board in his head and then tried to evaluate what does the endgame look like here. He's probably gone a couple of moves beyond what we even saw with the help of the analysis board before making that decision. So it's those moments where Magnus Carlsen chooses to use the majority of his time. He is still 1 minute and 45 seconds up on the clock, it should be said, and that's going to start becoming really important in a couple of minutes.
Absolutely. The clock is going to be a big factor in this one because the position is pretty complicated. You know, Nihal, he has that extra pawn, but look at the knight at the edge of the board. You know, it doesn't have a very bright future, at least not anytime soon. It's tied down to the defend of the b7 pawn. You can't go back with it so easily. Magnus, both rooks on open line, the bishop on b7 unchallenged for the rest of the game, doing a beautiful job as well. This is definitely enough compensation and piece activity for that pawn.
Definitely. Full compensation for Magnus Carlsen. Nihal not looking too comfortable. Also in the back of your mind, if you haven't faced Magnus Carlsen too many times, you know his reputation. You know in an endgame, he's going to take advantage of any slip you might make. And already, rook takes rook incoming. Will Magnus regain the pawn now with his queen? There are some fancy tactics. The black rook could potentially come down to the first rank with a check on the white king, but Magnus has it all under control. Will he restore the material balance? Nihal with 2 minutes. We're going to see all of his speed skills on show, surely now.
And the b7 pawn does fall. I will tell you the one good part about not facing Magnus too many times is that perhaps you haven't lost to him too many times. So that trauma does not exist. We'll see which one plays out here. Bishop to f1, defending the check. Now white unpins. Magnus getting ready to activate that bishop. Rook takes pawn. Is that a move that could pick up a pawn? A very key pawn in the position for Nihal.
Yeah, he can go for it now. Maybe he's just hesitating, scared of being pinned by the white rook. should still all be under control for Nihal Sarin, but he brings his king towards the center instead. Another very logical move.
He needs to start doing this faster, though. I mean, we have seen this time and time again from Magnus. He's very good at grinding out positions that look like they're drawn, and like we said on day one, the position's drawn until it's not. And that's all well and good if you haven't played Magnus that much before. But when he's also got over double your time, you just need to get a move on. And Nihal Sarin, he might be a speed demon, but we need to really, really move.
Big threat on the board. The Black Knight was about to be pinned by the White Rook, so it leaps away instead. Magnus now can go munching. He can grab the Black A7 pawn, restore the material balance. Currently Nihal a pawn up, but instead flicks in a check first. And now asking Nihal, big question. Do you step towards the center with the Black King? Looks like you might get mated if you do so, but instead he goes back to the wing, back to the flank, and Magnus now some quick moves, applying some pressure. That white A-pawn, so dangerous potentially.
And that is the hardest pawn for a knight to counter. It's the one on the flank lines, A or H. That A4 passer gives Magnus a strong edge to play for in the position. Nihal trying to set up his own counterplay, but with the Black King cut off on the side of the board, I'm wondering if this is got all the ingredients for a making of another Magnus Carlsen classic.
And watch out, there's a checkmate in 2 threatened by Magnus Carlsen. The White Bishop was threatening to come back, force the Black King to the back rank with the White Rook delivering the killer blow. This last move given a question mark, but fully understandable by Nihal Sarin, giving the Black King some breathing space. And right now he's down a pawn, but the Black Rook, Black Knight also eyeing up a pawn of their own.
But this is where Magnus has the opportunity to turn a screw. He smells the opportunity, actually makes the wrong move in this scenario, but crucially, it's 3.5 minutes, plays 1 minute. There will more likely than not be additional chances for Magnus here, even if this one is a missed one.
I don't believe this is going to be a missed one for Magnus. He's up on the position because of that A passer, even if Nihal wins the F2 pawn, but it's the clock. You know,
Exactly.
48 seconds, Nihal's a beast, he's flash, but with Magnus having 3.5 minutes, that's a big time deficit.
Huge moment. Magnus can win on the spot, but he has to find a narrow path. He has to start with a rook check, forcing the Black King onto a light square. Then the White Bishop would have come and checked the Black Rook. Instead, he misses it, Magnus Carlsen. He's going to give back his pawn. It's a 2 versus 2 situation here on the king side in terms of pawns. Dead, drawn endgame, but no time for Nihal.
Bishop takes knight, get the bishop and the knight off the board. Why is he thinking? Rook takes pawn has been played. For Magnus, he has to run away with the knight.
Magnus, is he wondering whether to try and flag Nihal Sarin here? He could offer a draw as well. This is a dead level endgame, but Magnus with that moral decision to play on time against his younger rival here, or to keep going, and wow, he gives up a pawn, Magnus Carlsen, in his quest to try and win this game.
He's playing to flag. He's down a pawn. He's going to try and create chances against Nihal's king. Nihal, he's done everything in his life to show his speed skill. Right now, this is where it all has to come together if he has to survive this.
It's crazy. Magnus missed the Rook H7 check, Bishop F7 check, and taking the Black Rook earlier. He would have forced a Bishop versus Knight endgame. Now it's a dead, drawn Rook endgame. It's all about the clock. Nihal Sarin, 30 seconds. He's going to show us why he has this reputation as the Flash.
2.5 minutes. For Magnus, it's a 2-minute advantage. He's running through. Nihal with a smile on his face. He knows that Magnus is coming for his clock.
Wow, and the pre-moves will begin. You cannot trade rooks as Magnus Carlsen. That would guide the game towards a draw, and we repeat the position. Magnus agreeing to the draw reluctantly there. Maybe not realizing it was a repetition. Nihal escapes.
Opportunities there for Magnus Carlsen to turn the screw, but game number 1 ends peacefully. This is excellent tension we're building in this match. Nihal Sarin maybe has escaped a little bit here, but it also gives him an excellent opportunity to try and strike back immediately with the white pieces.
What a fantastic start to this showdown we've got in an endgame with 28 seconds to survive against the good, against the world number 1. It's not an easy task, and Nihal shows that he's up for it. He's up for this fight. With the black pieces, getting a draw in game 1 has to be feeling good for the Indian prodigy.
That was a dream result for Nihal Sarin, especially the way it happened. Very uncharacteristic from Magnus to miss some winning moves there in the endgame. He could have actually won by force. It wasn't even that tricky. Magnus had 3+ minutes on his clock. Magnus was actually playing on the clock, maybe not being so objective in his decision-making. Very odd. Who would have predicted it? We would actually have thought the other way around, Nihal applying pressure on the clock.
It is one of those situations where pausing at the right moment as well. You have 2 or 3 extra minutes on the clock. You still have to choose and decide when to use them. So maybe it was a little bit of a surprise that in those situations where Magnus potentially had the big advantage, he actually played quite quickly.
It's also the feeling, right? You want to play on your opponent's clock. You don't want to give them those extra seconds to be able to think. So you rush through and you miss that one window of opportunity that you had. But as David says, Magnus doesn't usually do that. It's perhaps the storyline. And Magnus just takes a little bit of time to warm up. You know, if you have to strike against him, you need to do it in the first half of this match. Once Magnus finds his rhythm, once he finds the liquid flow, that's going to be tough.
Nice, nice there, Tanya. And yeah, Magnus, he himself would describe that missed opportunity as sloppy. He is his own harshest critic, Magnus Carlsen. He knows that was a missed opportunity, but he's also a master at resetting. And here we see a slightly offbeat D4 opening as Black sets up with a Fianchetto, now trying to strike at the white center. I guess we would call this a Torre attack, with White's Dark Squared Bishop coming out with an early pin. But yeah, Nihal Sarin, he is known to surprise his opponents early, play these offbeat lines and hope to absorb pressure and use his clock skills later. I'm going to say that Magnus, maybe it's just match strategy beforehand. He knows the clock is Nihal's biggest weapon. Maybe in his mind, he's like, just blitz. Keep that 3-minute buffer.
It's also a little bit of a test as well, right? I think it not difficult to see that a lot of people say Nihal's speed is his greatest asset. So in game number 1, it makes sense for Magnus to be probing, to be testing, to see how quickly can you actually move, can you keep up with the speed that I've got in the tank. And psychologically, maybe that's advantage Magnus for the match, because Nihal's now realizing, okay, I can move really quickly when I need to. I showed that at the end of that last game. That was fantastic. But I need to get into better positions over the board before that becomes necessary.
And although he allowed that kind of accidental repetition at the end there, Magnus, do you think, Tanya, he would have been able to flag Nihal Sarin with just rook and pawn versus rook and pawn? Nihal had just over 30 seconds. Do you think it would have been possible for Magnus if he'd been a bit quicker, a bit wilier on the clock?
You know, who knows? It's a really tough call because there's also the 50-move rule. At some point, there would have had to be a trade. But 28 seconds, I mean, to survive that, Nihal would really have to be on his A game. Hard to predict, but if I had to, you know what? I'm going to say Nihal would have survived it.
And he did survive in his own way in the end. As we see this position, not too much has changed, just one set of pawn trades. Black is camped out on his first 3 ranks. And very, very solid. Hard for White to step forward. No pawn breaks imminent for either side. It's a maneuvering battle.
And you know, who knows? We might be in a similar situation at some point in this match. It's just getting started. We're just in game 2. It's a best of 4. We might have some more of those crazy scrambles.
Bring them on.
And we do have to ask the question as well. Who do the crazy scrambles favor? Before the start of the match, we were thinking Magnus Carlsen, accuracy over the board. Nihal Sarin, when the time trouble starts, extremely quick. We've been given pause for thought. I wonder if it's nerves or something similar, where Nihal Sarin allowed Magnus Carlsen to get up to 2 minutes extra on the clock. And this was in the middle game, long before the time scrambles took place. So if he's able to manage that and then bring Carlsen into an endgame where it's actually Magnus who's being pressured on the clock, that would be really interesting to watch.
Time scrambles, I would say, David, favor Nihal Sarin, as long as the clocks are close, as long as it's a tight battle.
Sure,
you know, not Magnus running away with 2.5 minutes and Nihal playing with a minute on the clock.
Sure.
Also depends on the kind of position. But if it becomes sort of a level position and both players under 1 minute, it's anyone's game. I'd even give Nihal as a favorite in that one.
Agreed. If it's a level middle game, 30 seconds versus 30 seconds, I think Nihal really fancies his chances. But Magnus will try not to let that happen. A quick start to this game from Nihal Sarin. That's a good thing. These system types of openings, like the Torre attack, you put your bishop on the same square every time, put your pawns on the same square, develop your other minor pieces to logical posts. This lends itself to speed. You can pretty much pre-move your first 17 turns, as Nihal has done here. It's cost him a little bit of time, just over 1.5 minutes. But ultimately, you have no weaknesses. Very difficult for the opponent to find a plan. You bide your time for later.
And I've seen Nihal do these openings, these unorthodox, slightly offbeat lines, so often in speed chess. And the reasons that you explain, it's exactly that, right? You need to know the plans. You need to know where to put the pieces. It's not as much about direct lines here.
Sure.
So you can get those first few moves in super quickly and then just ask your opponent, do you know how to proceed in this position with black, especially when you're slightly cagey? Not a single pawn for Magnus beyond the third rank.
Well, let's spend a couple of moments talking about that right now. If we could pick a couple of pieces for their positions to improve, where do we want
A repetition? Is this the moment?
Already?
Magnus is offering a silent draw here. If the white knight goes back where it came from to attack the black d6 pawn, the black queen would then likely move. And Nihal says no, that would have been the third time they'd reached that position. It would have been a draw. Nihal, brave move playing on.
So gutsy by Nihal, in a level position. Even the clock time similar. Nihal says, I want a game. Because when you're playing against Magnus Carlsen, you have the white pieces. You need to make the most of every single opportunity. Maximize the chance of playing white. And Nihal knows he's got the space advantage. He knows he's got those extra seconds on the clock. It's game on. A bold decision, Magnus amused.
Magnus smiling there. He's like, please respect me in future, kid. But I think Magnus enjoys being challenged. He loves seeing these young players take him on head first.
It's maybe Magnus was aiming for psychological torture, but I feel like Nihal Sarin has gone, no, absolutely no way. I want to take the bull by the horns here. Absolutely love to see it. So now, in this position, where do we want the pieces to be on the board? Let's talk about key themes and ideas for white and black. What are we looking to accomplish, say, 5 to 10 moves from now?
The white pieces need to improve. I think for black, it's clearer to see which pieces aren't well placed. I'm going to point out the black queen, stuck in the back rank, not looking great. The black rook in the corner, therefore a bit hemmed in. The white knights look like they have a lot of potential. First, the white bishop is going round, maybe to the b3 square. The white knight's coming forward. Watch out, the black queen in the meantime, making a bit of a battery. No threat yet. The g2 square is defended by the white knight. But ultimately, it is about jockeying for position right now. To my eyes, it looks maybe easier to play with black, but white, great centralization so far.
And he makes another bishop retreating move right now, and Magnus continues to improve the position of his pieces. When you've maximized the placement of your pieces, then you start thinking about pawn breaks. For Magnus, one of them does exist. It's a thematic idea in such structures to push the b pawn. b5 is something that's always in the air, to try to gain some squares, to try to liquidate, sort of a minority attack, a 2 versus 3 on the left flank. Sure. You try to target it with that b pawn.
So it's easier to see black's position improving here. You can see with the bishop to g7, black's pieces compared to a few moves ago already looking like the pieces are a little bit more coordinated. Where do white's pieces want to be? What's Nihal aiming for here?
Well, he's doing the same, right? Get the rook to those central lines. He's also inviting Magnus to potentially push the e-pawn forward, hitting the knight, which would allow the knight to a beautiful spot on d4, attacking the black queen as well.
Okay.
So trying to provoke that to happen. The knight and the bishop eyeing the e5 pawn, sort of paralyze Magnus's knight and rook to defend that pawn as well. The white bishop on b3 will be nicely lined up on a beautiful diagonal, eyeing that tender spot of f7. I think he's done this well. He can think about doubling up on the D line. Again, it looks like the kind of position that's easier to improve for white than for Magnus.
Yeah, and it's a low responsibility type of position for white. You're not really risking too much, at least not yet. You're saying to black, yes, your pawn in the center, that black e-pawn, that's the key to the position. That's vulnerable for now. A lot of my pieces are lined up against it. You don't really want to move it forward. That white bishop looking good too. So it's kind of that type of position where you're just waiting, saying, it's your responsibility to do something here, Magnus, and that's going to cost you time on the clock.
One of the hardest things for me when I used to play would be that when I've declined a repetition from my opponent, that would just play at the back of my mind. And here, at a completely different level and a different stage, Nihal Sarin declined a repetition by Magnus just a few moves ago. How easy is it for a player to forget about that and just focus rather than thinking, what should I have just pulled the brakes, bailed out, gotten closer to the Armageddon?
Yeah, I think in a long game, you would have more time for this to just clutter your mind and for that thought to go round and round. But luckily, you don't have too much time on the clock. I think the players will just be calculating here. Nihal spending a few seconds now to come up with a plan.
Also, to be fair, when declining the repetition, we got more of an emotional reaction from Magnus than we did from Nihal. I think it strengthened his determination. It galvanized his will a little bit, whereas Magnus was thinking, oh, okay, excellent. This kid's not to be intimidated.
Yeah.
Great. Now let's do the job over the board.
And that's been the fascinating part about this younger generation, right? That they just don't let Magnus Carlsen's name get to their head. They have immense respect for Magnus. They've grown up idolizing him, but they all say, when you face him on the board, you need to forget his name.
You need to, otherwise he'll be world #1 for the next 40 years. You absolutely have to. That's, I think playing without fear is the traditional mentality of a challenger to the throne. And if you imagine what's potentially at stake, Nihal Sarin is only looking at what's on the board. But if you think about it this way, a match win against Magnus Carlsen at the Esports World Cup, that is an incredible feather to have in your cap. And he does have the opportunity to do that right now.
That would be by far the highlight of his career, Nihal, and also by far the longest think of the game from him. But long think, wrong think. He's traded off a set of pieces. But look at this. The white knight now kicked to a bad square. The knight has no central squares to jump to. You cannot block the d-file because the white rook needed to defend its bishop. But now we see a trade. That white knight sidelined, looking horrible, almost trapped. That was a horrible decision from Nihal Sarin. He was overthinking it.
And he took about 2 minutes, like you said, to make that move and played the worst one of the game so far. Magnus now, all his pieces, slowly and surely coming forward, now challenging the D line as well. That knight's headed to the D3 square. Knight D3, block the connection between the two rooks, win the open line.
He was so patient for so long, Nihal Sarin. He was playing so well for so long. He just needed to sit, wait, and ask Magnus what you're doing. Instead, he gave Magnus this clear path forward, this clear plan, and look at the Black Knight jumping.
Wow.
Rook trade offered, but you cannot get greedy here with white. Let's show what might happen if the rooks get traded, and if the white queen tries to grab a pawn in the center now, we would see the game end abruptly after the queen swoops in, the white king sliding into the corner, and now the black queen can move pretty much anywhere. And the knight check on f2 is going to be deadly. A royal fork hitting the white king in the corner, the white queen, white rook. This would be game over, since the white rook cannot take the knight due to a check on the back rank. We're actually headed in this direction. Nihal Sarin cannot allow the black queen in to his position.
Oof, tactics now, and you're down on the clock and you sort of walked into it. And that's a frustrating thought for Nihal Sarin right now. You know, again, the flashbacks of a declined draw offer and then taking this long thing and landing yourself up in this position. He's on the defense. It's still far from over, but one thing's for sure. You compare Black's knight to the white knight,
Exactly.
Black knight the winner. The bishop on g7, eyeing those two pawns whenever b4 happens and there's a weakness created. Stronger than the white bishop. The black rook more active. The black queen, super strong, eyeing that f2 spot. And b4 on the board immediately.
This is the danger, right? Magnus didn't just see the weakness, but he executed it so quickly. Nihal Sarin actually did a great job, credit to him, in the first half of this game so far, managing his time, but that long think into what might be the game-changing move, maybe even the game-ending move, really cost him so much. Magnus is turning the screw. All of these follow-up moves by Magnus Carlsen, they're happening near instantaneously.
And there we see a quick pawn trade. Magnus at least now has to take a time out to defend his central pawn. There we go. Nihal has set up a nice defense. The white bishop holds some important pawns. The white knight nearby, now retreating. Magnus is going to go a pawn up. That white c-pawn is doomed. Short term, long term, there we go. It does drop immediately, but it's all pawns on one side of the board. None of those pawns are passed. Nihal still has some defensive chances, but the clock is the main concern.
Magnus has famously in the past said he does not believe in fortresses. Can Nihal Sarin prove him wrong? Can he set up a fortress down upon in this position?
Big question. I think that's the key question. It's going to be so tough. He needs some simplifications here. He needs queens off the board. We need knights, rooks, something off the board to make it easier to pre-move. The reason he was able to hold the previous game with 28 seconds on his clock, it was just rooks and pawns.
Yep.
But the complication here, the complexity of this whole army still remaining, not going to be easy.
I think that no matter which side of the argument you're on whether fortresses can exist or not, I think they can be broken down if you don't have enough time to consider the perfect move in response to every attacking move. And we're getting to 4 minutes versus 2 minutes. There's an argument to say Nihal Sarin needs a fortress, but unfortunately, I think the clock's going to end up being the key to barreling down the front door, even if one exists.
Yeah, and look at Magnus, his last move, given an exclamation mark. It's such an innocuous looking move, but Magnus just keeps the tension. And there, the white queen gives way. Now the black bishop no longer pinned, expecting that one to move. And again, it cost Nihal there 34 seconds. He doesn't have too much time left. 34 seconds to play what is a mistake.
And with piece formation that Magnus has, the knight, the bishop, the queen, so much into Nihal's camp, you know, that extra pawn, Nihal will have to burn time on every single move. And that's the problem in this position. There are no easy moves. There are no fast moves for white.
I think Magnus is using his time here to basically work out which of these options will either force Nihal into at least a 30-second think or force him to make a mistake almost immediately. The bishop goes back. Bishop e5 now played on the board.
Inviting some trades there of the minor pieces. If white was to capture the knight, Magnus intends on capturing the bishop and get that stronghold on the d3 square. Put a strong passer. Get your pawn moving forward. Magnus putting immense pressure on Nihal's knight.
Great time usage there from Magnus Carlsen. Yes, he invested around 40 seconds, but he slowed Nihal down. For every 40 seconds Magnus has, Nihal has to play a lot quicker. Wow, he just waits with his king. There are some pins. The black knight cannot move since the black queen would be vulnerable, so just maintaining the position. But again, Nihal spending 30 seconds. Magnus needs to keep trying to create those long thinks from his opponent. Nihal needs to speed up meanwhile.
Well, now it's a big threat. Knight takes knight, attacking the white queen is threatened as Magnus unpins his own queen in the position, again forcing Nihal to come up with a defensive strategy. And you know, you can find those defenses once, twice, but can you do it 10 times against the world number one?
And that's exactly the kind of thing that Magnus is so good at doing. Ask a question? Cool, great. Glad you found the answer. I'm going to ask you 20 more. And the moment you get one of those answers wrong is the moment I pounce and take the game from you. Nihal Sarin now under 1 minute on the clock. Magnus Carlsen aiming to turn the screw.
Well, big decision. He gives up his rook for a knight. There is some tension along the e-file. So if Magnus wants to take that rook back with his pawn, he has to calculate well. It's very tempting. That pawn is so close to landing as a promotion, as a new queen. But Magnus, he's calculating here. He takes with the rook instead, taking with the pawn, according to the computer, was winning. Now, again, it's a a rook for knight advantage for Magnus, but still some work to do.
It is a winning advantage in exchange up for Magnus, but again, the question, can Nihal Sarin set up a fortress as his clock goes red? He's playing on the dark squares, trying to set up that battery. The bishop lands on that central square. e5 is the big idea, threatening checkmates to Magnus Carlsen's king. How is Magnus stopping bishop e5?
Ooh, he offers a queen trade, Magnus Carlsen. If the queens do come off, the game will go on a lot longer, but only black can win. I think that is objectively a winning position too. Nihal deciding there's no other way. The white king otherwise would have been caught in the mating net. And here we're going to see the technical phase with the black king trying to get into the battle.
This is tense. This feels like a repeat of game one. Magnus Carlsen winning. Nihal Sarin, 39 seconds on the clock, needs a miracle to save this one. It happened in game one. Will it happen again?
The grind is beginning. Magnus could make this last another 30 moves, but he's just looking for that one additional critical mistake. It feels like we've got a lot of nails in the coffin. We now need the final one.
The black king is coming. The black king is making its way slowly towards the white pawn on f3. You need to put your pieces on light squares. When you're playing against a bishop in an endgame like this, when it comes down to time flagging, keep your pieces on the opposite color complex. But look at this. Nihal's trying to set up a blockade on the dark squares so the black king cannot pass. But it's a matter of time. White is running out of moves. The black pieces are almost optimized. Black is threatening to win the white pawn on h4, and now the black king can cross over. It's coming. It's winning for Magnus Carlsen.
And there he blocks that bishop diagonal. The black king about to move forward. Magnus about to win this game as the king gets closer to that white pawn. Nihal Sarin is going to resign. Don't take that bishop. That would have been a stalemate.
And there we go. Magnus Carlsen wins by resignation. A small joke there, a stalemate trap, but Magnus dodges it, takes the win.
And Magnus Carlsen, the world #1, asking questions of Nihal Sarin here, saying, "You're quick with no time on the clock, but are you quick enough?" to find the thread that you have to push through that needle over the board. On this occasion, he was found wanting, and Magnus Carlsen goes 1.5 to a half up in this quarterfinal.
Magnus Carlsen does not believe in fortresses. None were to be built here today by Nihal Sarin. A very difficult endgame to hold. Magnus on top from the very start, winning material and then finishing it off in style in this endgame. Flawless conversion.
That flawless conversion. Magnus, again, that strategy of staying 2-3 minutes ahead of Nihal, it's proved so effective. And Nihal, nice to see him with a bit of humor there towards the end of the game, try to set up that stalemate, but ineffective in the end. You just can't fight Magnus in those types of positions.
Now, what I would say though, I would say that Nihal Sarin did a good job of not letting Magnus Carlsen get ahead on the clock until that mid-game period where he went into that deep think and ended up basically committing a blunder. So I want to give him credit, because compared to the start of the match, he actually did a fantastic job there. What changed?
Yeah, it was Nihal Sarin, I think, just overthinking things. He was so smooth, but when it came to the critical moment, panicking, that keenness to simplify came back to haunt him.
So there we go. The first 2 games are under our belt. Magnus Carlsen ahead 1.5 to a half. We're going to a quick break, folks, and when we come back, it's game number 3 of this quarterfinal chess at the Esports World Cup.
After a draw in the opening game, Grandmaster Hikaru Nakamura has won games 2 and 4 to get past Levon Aronian by a score of 2.5 to 1.5. What was the biggest difference in the match today, Hikaru?
We're walking? Okay, sure. I mean, I think the difference is that I had this built-in advantage from the get-go, that if we get low on time, I should be a big favor. And I think Levon definitely in the first game felt that pressure. I mean this horrible blunder King D4, which really messed everything up. But I won the second game. Third game was choppy, and I lost. But I think I just kept my nerves together, and I kept trying to play fast, put pressure on the clock, and ultimately Levon cracked.
And finally, you did hang your rook, king and rook versus king and rook, but I didn't see an expression out of your face. How did you get past that so quickly?
I mean, you have to move. He has 4 seconds. If you let him think, he's going to find the checkmate. And I think, if I had made that blunder against Alireza or Magnus, maybe I'm not sure about Magnus, but definitely Alireza, I would have lost that. So just have to be a little bit more careful, but I think overall the match was mostly in my favor, so I'm pretty pleased with the result.
We'll let you go to the key crusher. We could have a Team Falcons versus Team Falcons final. We will see, but Hikaru might also have to play against Magnus. While he goes to crush his key, he's also maybe going to check out Magnus's game. It should also be said, this ends the magical run of Levon Aronian. He's had quite a July, but it is the 31st of July. The month ends, and Levon's magical run also ends.
Match point. Magnus Carlsen leading 1.5 to 1/2 in this quarterfinal. If he manages to score the victory with the white pieces in this next game, he could end the quarterfinal right here, right now, and add Nihal Sarin's key to his collection. Can he do it?
He's got the white pieces. You know, he's got momentum on his side. Both games close to victory. Gets it done on the second one. Of course, Magnus Carlsen can do it. But the big question, can Nihal do it? Can he try to take it to that fourth game? And what does he need to do to switch things up?
A lot depends on Nihal's strategy as well. Here we see him, eyes closed, meditating, maybe trying to visualize how he can claw his way back into this match. But if he goes all out with the black pieces, Magnus will get his chance. It's very difficult there. If we see Nihal maybe try to shore up his defenses, lock this game down, escape with a draw, take his chances in the final game with white, then we might see Magnus try to just minimize the risk. And they're already the first face from Magnus as we see the first surprise as well.
You know, Magnus loves a challenge. We saw that with that smile on his face when Nihal declined the repetition. I think he'd want a game on. He's not going to just give Nihal that shutdown opportunity because that definitely, like you said, David, has to be Nihal's strat here, right? You try to just play it safe with black, get that draw in, final game, go all out. All guns blazing on Magnus with white. I think Magnus will play to try to wrap this up in 3. That's his style.
I've revised my what am I looking out for in the middle game. Previously, I said, okay, it's all about whether or not Nihal Sarin can get that clock advantage on Magnus Carlsen. I'm gonna change that based on what we saw in the last game. I'm going to say it depends on what both players do with their first deep think. Because if we don't see an amazing advantage or maybe a really, really cool complex continuation that puts Magnus in the tank, then that deep think would have been for naught. So I want to understand when Nihal is choosing his moments to use that time and whether he can do that effectively here against Magnus. He's going to need to do that if he wants to win this game.
100%. He'll need to invest that time wisely, need to not fall behind on the clock. Good start to this game by Nihal. He's 1 minute up already.
Yeah.
Quick surprise here in the Queen's Gambit declined. We saw a trade of pawns. Magnus is the king of this pawn structure. He normally prefers it, though, from the black side. We call this the Carlsbad pawn structure, with things locked, at least short term. No real pawn breaks in the middle of the board. And black's light squared bishop coming out. Good news for Nihal. Looks like a very healthy, stable position to build from.
That's one of the aims if you're playing black in this Queen's Gambit declined Carlsbad structure, right? You want your bishop on the light squares, but Magnus with his last move is potentially hinting at a g4 to develop to fianchetto his own bishop and get aggressive. That could be the other way to get the pieces out. Instead, he targets the bishop with the knight and wins it. He's got an unchallenged bishop. That is the first imbalance of the game.
First, maybe of many, but for now, Nihal has to decide how to develop his pieces. We see bishop for knight trade. Black has doubled pawns. That comes with pros and cons. Black's pawns on the g-file mean that the h-file and the rook there is open. So both sides probably reluctant to castle on that flank until a decision is made by the opponent here.
Yeah, it feels like who's going to blink first. Actually, this is the best moment for the first castle graphic as far as I'm concerned. I'm looking here going, who's going to blink first in this position? Can you go kingside? Well, actually, opposite side castling and launching a big attack is possible if you miscalculate this.
Let's predict. Which way is the black king going? It's Nihal Sarin's move right now.
I predict the black king goes the exact same way as Magnus's king goes.
Yeah.
He goes to the left, Magnus, and Nihal does it first. He gets it on the queen side.
I thought there was a chance maybe that Magnus would react to Nihal and choose to go the opposite side, but no such luck. If it was black, black would absolutely respond to white, but it's interesting that black castled first, Magnus still responded in kind.
Yeah, I think normally, especially for Nihal, who's behind in the match, you kind of want to wait to see where your opponent's king goes. Magnus, because he wants safety first, he's ahead. He's happy to castle on the same flank. Nihal ideally would have gone the other way, no matter where Magnus has gone with his king. He would castle the opposite flank, but ultimately there were no remaining useful moves. He had to commit, and here we see, again, the V pawn structure, or white's pawns all on dark squares from the center to that right flank, and the black knight sitting pretty on g4 for now.
And it's going to be now about finding plans, right? You've placed your minors where they are. The knight on g4 looking good. The queen on d6 centralized. One of your rook on the open lines. On the e-file center of the board, the rook on h8. Guess what? It's already developed from its starting position. You don't need to move it any further. And if you're Nihal, you need to find a way to either shut down this action, to make sure things remain under control, or create some dynamics. I think he's going to go for the former. He's not going to try to push too many pawns. He's not going to provoke weaknesses. If the opportunities come, he'll take it. But he won't take the fight to Magnus.
But yeah, because this isn't a must-win game here, remember. If we draw this game, Nihal Sarin will still go to a game number 4. It is still possible for him to take this tie to Armageddon or even win it in game number 4.
It's a must-not-lose game.
It's a must-not-lose game, exactly. So we'll see what happens there. The base of the V is being attacked right now. And some questions are being asked of Magnus. They're saying, look, there are ways for you to swap off that knight, but do you really want to use the light squared bishop to do it? It's such a powerful piece for white right now. I don't think that sort of trade is beneficial.
And a bit of a cool trick here from Magnus Carlsen. He's attacking the black knight. And if this knight moves and swoops in to capture a pawn, it will find itself pinned by one of the white rooks. The black queen will be behind it. That would lose a piece for Nihal Sarin, meaning he needs to either retreat the knight or sidestep with his own queen to defend it. That's a nice little kind of two-move tactic from Magnus Carlsen. Chess is all about these combinations, and that's a nice, effective one.
It's a two-move tactic that's bought him 30 seconds on the clock as well. That wasn't the longest think of the match, but you string 3 or 4 of those together, and it starts becoming problem territory.
Yeah, he forced Nihal to just lose a couple of moves with his queen as well, so costing time on the clock, costing time on the board, and white's queen improves. The white knight might start relocating as well. The white rooks could also find better posts. Nihal's lacking a plan here, still very much a kind of stable, level-looking position due to the fact there are no pawn breaks, but Magnus surely happy with that scenario.
Here's my question. What's the white plan? Are we going for e4 in the medium to long term here?
It's always in the air, but first you want to improve every single piece of yours, right? And that's what Magnus does. He does double up on the C line. His queen, he might move it one step forward to place it on an active diagonal. Now Nihal offering some trades, so asking for some decisions here. The one thing you don't want to do is take knight takes knight. That would have ended up in a fork. Pawn takes knight, would have attacked the queen and the bishop. So Magnus simply retreats with the queen, now potentially threatening to recapture that knight with his own knight.
The plans will reveal themselves later. I think the first order of business for both sides is to try and put pieces on as active squares as possible. It's very difficult to kind of open lines. That is the problem. Here we see trying to close the center, Nihal Sarin. That makes sense. Blocking the center will favor the knights, but then again, black has a very strong knight. How to improve the other one? Magnus now goes on the flank.
Well, he's going to be forced to improve the other one in a second. A4 with A5 threatened. This is a route 1 strategy here, but a very, very real problem for black to solve.
And it's one of Magnus's favorite moves, one of Magnus's favorite strategy in this position, especially when your opponent's knight is on the square, as was Nihal Sarin's. It sort of invites the A-pawn to push forward and force it to retreat. It might not stop there. That pawn might even go to A6 to create those weaknesses that white was earlier trying to find. And I think it's so instructive. Whenever these two knights are either on B6 or G6, get those flank pawns moving to start targeting them.
Alfie, the A-pawn, marching forward. It's going to act as a battering ram, trying to open up the enemy king. It's always controversial because you do push a pawn in front of your own king as well. And Nihal Sarin has played such a risky move. It's given a double question mark. This could be the match ending. Magnus Carlsen, the position is so blocked. If he doesn't take that pawn, he might not get a second opportunity. Nihal's taking a huge risk. And let's show what Magnus is now calculating. He'll invest a bit of time. We have time, therefore, to show on our analysis board, bishop takes pawn, taking advantage of the fact that pawn has moved forward. And the pawn recapturing would allow the white rooks into the game. This looks over. The black queen is hit. She's going to move forward with a check. But when the white king steps out of the way, the black king is left to its own devices. I don't really see any way to stem the tide here. We're going to see this play out on the board. There's a huge threat of rook takes pawn, and the black king might just be doomed. Let's go back and show. Magnus is going to show us what's about to happen. Checkmate incoming, potentially.
And And he does fall back in that final position with his knight to defend it. Magnus on the attack. If he wins this, Nihal Sarin will be eliminated. His key will get crushed. The queen about to come into the attack. B3, B6, A7. That's game over. B7 checkmate. Thank you very much. I'm going to the semi-finals is what Magnus is saying.
Look at Nihal Sarin, you can see the realization on his face suddenly. It's just knockout within a few moves. The only way to postpone this is to throw pieces away. You have to move the black knight out the way to bring the rooks across, but the black knight is trapped. Nihal Sarin, he looks devastated. This is his final moments in the Esports World Cup here in Riyadh.
It's the final few moves of it, and you can see it on him. You look at Nihal, and that's all you need to know about the position. Queen B3, a square that he cannot fight for, a square that he can't stop, and that would be checkmate incoming. Nihal Sarin knows it's time to say goodbye to Riyadh.
He's coming to terms with his position now. Magnus still cool as a cucumber. He was looking a little bit more intense before making that move, and that's because he was busy calculating out, making sure that there's absolutely no rescue. Nihal Sarin looking positively emotional now. The realization of what's happening is hitting him. Unfortunately, his life in the tournament is on the line, and there's nothing he can do now to stop this inevitable victory by the world number one.
This is heartbreaking. It's a quiet move, ultimately, that he'd missed. At the end of that variation, it was 3-4 move calculation to get to here, but he didn't realize that just pushing the rook forward would end in this devastating checkmate. He might be resigning any moment now, Nihal Sarin, as the white queen coming forward. We'll draw the arrows again to show what's about to happen. This will end the game. The black queen cannot bring herself over to that flank in time. She's cut off from the action.
And it all came down to that one pawn move. And Magnus Carlsen, it barely took any time for him. Nihal about to resign, and there it goes. Magnus Carlsen makes it to the semi-finals.
Magnus Carlsen makes it to 2.5 points, and with 4 points on offer, he crosses the threshold needed to advance to the semi-finals here at the Esports World Cup. A tense draw in game number 1, followed by 2 decisive victories. Well fought by Nihal Sarin, but it's world number 1, Magnus Carlsen, who advances.
A match in 3 for the world number 1. He prevails as he usually does. The chess juggernaut, he rolls on, and these were the final few moments. A beautiful bishop sacrifice, the rook coming in, a small sidestep, only to be followed by a checkmate on Nihal Sarin in the next few moves. And for Nihal, nothing was to be done but to resign. For Magnus Carlsen, he's in a flow state today. It's liquid Carlsen.
Very impressive from Magnus Carlsen. He had chances in game 1, didn't quite convert, but upped the level, went through the gears in games 2 and 3. And yeah, that final blow there, so sharp, he barely even needed time to calculate. Nihal Sarin ultimately tried everything he could, but not much to do against the world number 1 in that form.
He was making sure we never even got to a point where the amazing time scramble skills of Nihal Sarin were called into question. Magnus got the job done in regulation. Let's go ahead now to the stage and hear from the world number 1.